I remember that day vividly, the day Clara came into my home carrying her newborn, with Mark by her side. They had a gleam in their eyes, one of triumph and malice, not the warmth you'd expect from new parents. I stood there, frozen, as Clara spoke, her voice dripping with condescension. "I've fulfilled the dream Mark had, Helen. Something you couldn't do," Clara said, her smirk wide as she rocked the baby gently. Mark nodded in agreement, his eyes not meeting mine. "Our little Zoe here is going to be a stunner, just like her mom. Maybe a model or an actress someday," Mark added, his voice betraying a hint of pride that felt like a dagger to my heart. "It's time we head back. We've shown off our happiness to Helen, the singleton. I'm really satisfied today," he continued, exchanging a look with Clara that I could only describe as vile. I was dumbstruck, watching them use their child as a weapon against me. My inability to have children was a sensitive topic, one that Mark knew all too well. Yet here he was, flaunting his new family in my face, with Clara leading the charge. "Why? Why do this?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. Clara laughed, a sound so cold it sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, Helen, it's not about the child. It's about showing you what you couldn't give Mark, what you couldn't give us." Mark remained silent, his complicity as loud as Clara's words. I felt a rage building inside me, a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. How could the man I spent nearly 2 decades with be so cruel? As they turned to leave, I found my voice. "You think you've won, but this isn't happiness. It's shallow and empty." Clara paused, turning her head slightly, her smile never faltering. "Happiness is subjective, Helen, and right now I'm on cloud 9. They left, leaving a silence that echoed through the empty halls of the home I once shared with Mark, a home that now felt like a tomb of my former life. That night, I couldn't sleep. Their words, their smug satisfaction, it all replayed in my mind, fueling a resolve I didn't know I had. Mark and Clara had shown their true colors, and it was time for me to show mine. I wasn't going to let their provocation be the end of my story. No, this was just the beginning. The beginning of their downfall. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a plan began to form. A plan not just for revenge, but for reclaiming my dignity and showing them that I, Helen, was not a victim of their cruelty, but a survivor. The next morning, I woke up with a clear purpose. I was going to fight back, but not in the way they expected. I was going to rise above, and in doing so, ensure they got what they deserved. But first, I needed evidence. Evidence of their betrayal, of their true intentions. And I knew just where to start. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and revelations I was perhaps not ready to face. Yet, I was determined. For too long, I had let Mark's words and actions define me. It was time to redefine myself on my own terms, and so, with a newfound strength, I began to lay the groundwork for what was to come. Mark and Clara had underestimated me, thinking they could parade their betrayal without consequence. They were wrong. Very wrong. The next few days, I acted with a singular focus, gathering evidence of Mark and Clara's affair. It wasn't difficult. Their arrogance had made them careless. I found emails, texts, photos, each piece a stab to my heart, but also a brick in the foundation of my plan. Then, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. Mark had always been meticulous about his digital footprint, but in his newfound bliss, he'd become sloppy. I discovered he had a meeting scheduled with Clara at a fancy downtown restaurant, a public display of their relationship, no doubt. It was the perfect chance to confront them. I arrived at the restaurant early, securing a spot where I could watch them unnoticed. Soon enough they walked in, laughing, touching, like a scene from a movie. A movie about betrayal. As they settled into their seats, oblivious to the world, I approached their table. Clara spotted me first, her smirk fading into a look of surprise. "Helen, what a surprise," Clara managed, her voice faltering. "Surprised? You shouldn't be. Not after the show you two put on at my doorstep," I replied, my voice steady, my heart racing. Mark looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and guilt. "Helen, this isn't what it looks like," he started, the lie so blatant it was almost laughable. "Oh, save it, Mark. I'm not here to listen to your excuses. I'm here to give you both a warning," I said, leaning closer. "Your little secret? It's not so secret anymore. I know everything." Clara regained her composure, her smile returning, but it was strained. "And what do you plan to do with that knowledge, Helen? Ruin us? Please, you don't have it in you." Her words, meant to belittle me, only fueled my resolve. No, Clara. Thus, I plan to make sure you face the consequences of your actions, both of you. Mark's face paled, the reality of the situation dawning on him. Helen, please, let's talk about this. We can sort it out. There's nothing to sort out, Mark. You made your choice. Now, you'll live with it, I said, turning to leave, their stunned silence music to my ears. As I walked away, I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I had made my stand, and there was no turning back now. The next steps required careful planning and precision. My next move was to visit a lawyer. The lawyer, Miss Avery, listened intently as I laid out my evidence and my intentions. She was sympathetic but also brutally honest about the challenges ahead. Divorce was messy, and given Mark's position and resources, it wouldn't be easy. But I'm not just fighting for a divorce, Miss Avery. I'm fighting for justice. For my dignity, I explained, my determination clear. Miss Avery nodded, understanding the stakes. Then we'll make sure we're prepared for whatever they throw at us. It's not just about the legal battle, it's about ensuring you come out of this stronger. With a plan in place, I left her office feeling a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. The road ahead was daunting, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my destiny. But the real surprise came the following day when a package arrived at my door. Inside, I found a flash drive and an anonymous note. Thought you should know the whole story. Curiosity piqued. I plugged the drive into my computer and was met with a barrage of documents, photos, and videos. Evidence not just of the affair, but of financial misconduct by Mark, leveraging company resources for his rendezvous with Clara. As I sifted through the files, a plan began to form. Mark and Clara thought they had played me for a fool, but they were about to learn they had underestimated Helen. This was more than just betrayal. It was corruption, and I had just the evidence to prove it. The game had changed, and I was now holding the winning cards. It was time to play them. Armed with the evidence from the flash drive, I arranged a meeting with Mark's company's board of directors. Walking into the corporate building, a sense of unease mixed with determination settled over me. This was where Mark had built his career, and I was about to expose his darkest secrets. I was greeted by the board with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. As I connected my laptop to the projector, I glanced around the room, my resolve firming. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here not just as Mark's wife, but as someone who has uncovered significant misconduct within this company, I began, my voice steady despite the shaking of my hands. The room was silent, all eyes fixed on the screen as I presented the evidence, transactions, emails, hotel receipts, all pointing to Mark using company funds for his affair with Clara. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to shock and anger as the presentation went on. Mark, who had been sitting confidently at the table, looked as if he was shrinking with each slide. Helen, this is a serious accusation. Are you certain of the authenticity of this evidence? One of the board members asked, his tone grave. Absolutely, and I believe a thorough investigation will confirm everything I've presented today, I replied, locking eyes with Mark, who refused to meet my gaze. The meeting concluded with the board promising a full investigation and Mark being suspended pending the outcome. As I left the room, Mark caught up to me, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. Helen, how could you do this? You've destroyed everything, he hissed, grabbing my arm. I pulled away, my gaze cold. You did this to yourself, Mark. You thought you could betray me, use the company for your own selfish desires, and get away with it. You were wrong. Leaving Mark behind, I walked out of the building, feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had taken the first step in holding him accountable for his actions, but I knew this was just the beginning. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The company's investigation confirmed my evidence, and Mark was officially terminated from his position. The news made headlines, and Mark's once respectable reputation was now in ruins. But Clara wasn't going to let things slide so easily. She confronted me one day in a cafe, her eyes blazing with fury. You think you've won, Helen? You've ruined Mark, but I won't let you get away with this. Clara spat, her voice low and threatening. I haven't done anything that you and Mark didn't do to yourselves, I replied calmly, sipping my coffee. You both played a dangerous game and lost. It's that simple. Clara leaned in, her voice venomous. This isn't over, Helen. I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me. I met her gaze, unflinching. I'm not afraid of you, Clara. You've already shown your true colors, and I have nothing left to lose. Bring it on. Clara stormed out of the cafe, leaving a trail of whispered speculations in her wake. I knew this was far from over, but I also knew that I had already survived their worst. Whatever Clara planned, I was ready for it. As I left the cafe, I realized that this ordeal had changed me. I was no longer the woman who could be manipulated and betrayed without consequence. I was stronger, more resilient, and ready to face whatever challenges came my way. The battle lines were drawn, and I was prepared to defend my newfound strength at all costs. Clara and Mark had underestimated me, and they were about to learn the true cost of their actions. The drama and the battle for revenge were far from over, but I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the architect of their downfall, and I would see this through to the end. The fallout from Mark's termination was immediate and brutal. The press had a field day, and Mark became a pariah in his professional circle. With his career in tatters, our divorce proceedings began. I expected Mark to fight dirty, but the evidence I had against him left him with little room to maneuver. Our first meeting with the divorce attorneys was tense. Mark tried to maintain a semblance of control, but the situation was clearly out of his hands. "Let's get this over with," Mark said through clenched teeth as we sat down at the conference table. "I agree. The sooner the better," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Mark's lawyer, a slick, middle-aged man named Richard, laid out their initial offer. It was laughable, considering the circumstances. "We believe this is a fair division of assets, considering both parties' contributions to the marriage," Richard said, sliding a document across the table. My lawyer, Miss Avery, glanced over the document and scoffed. "This is hardly fair, considering Mr. Smith's misconduct has not only ended his career, but has also brought significant emotional distress to my client." Mark glared at me, his anger palpable. "You're going to bleed me dry, aren't you, Helen?" "This isn't about money, Mark. It's about accountability. You seem to forget that your actions brought us here," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. The negotiations were long and arduous, but eventually we reached a settlement that felt like justice. Mark would have to liquidate some of his assets to meet the terms, a fact that seemed to sting him more than anything. As we left the attorney's office, Mark caught up to me in the parking lot. "I hope you're happy, Helen. You've taken everything from me." "You did this to yourself, Mark. I just stopped turning the other cheek," I replied before walking away, leaving him standing alone. With the divorce finalized, I felt a chapter of my life closing. But there was still the matter of Clara, who had been ominously silent since our last encounter. I knew she was planning something, but I was determined not to let her drag me down with her. A few weeks later, Clara's plan became clear. She launched a smear campaign against me, spreading lies and rumors in a desperate attempt to salvage her own reputation. It was pathetic, but some people were swayed by her words. I refused to engage in a public mudslinging contest. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life, investing my energy into new projects and distancing myself from the toxic drama that Clara was trying to create. However, I couldn't ignore her completely. Clara's actions were becoming more desperate and erratic, bordering on harassment. It was time to put an end to her vendetta once and for all. I arranged to meet Clara in a public place, a busy cafe where her antics would be witnessed by many. She arrived, smug and confident, clearly believing she had the upper hand. "Ready to beg for mercy, Helen?" Clara sneered as she sat down. "I'm not here to play games, Clara. I'm here to tell you it ends now. Your attempts to ruin my reputation are pathetic and transparent. Everyone can see through them," I said calmly. Clara's confidence wavered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "You think you can intimidate me? I have nothing left to lose." "That's where you're wrong. You still have your freedom to lose. Harassment, defamation, spreading false information. I have enough to take legal action against you, Clara. And I will if you don't stop," I warned. Clara's facade crumbled, revealing the fear underneath. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me. I've had enough of your games. It's over, Clara. Move on with your life if you can," I said, standing up to leave. Clara was silent, her eyes following me as I walked away. I knew I had finally gotten through to her. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. I had reclaimed my life, but the scars of betrayal would take time to heal. As I stepped out into the sunlight, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I was looking forward to discovering what it held on my own terms. Life began to settle into a new normal. My projects flourished, and the shadow of my past with Mark and Clara seemed to recede with each passing day. However, peace was short-lived. Word reached me that Clara was back in town and she wasn't alone. I braced myself for what was to come, refusing to be caught off guard again. The confrontation came sooner than expected. I was at a community event when Clara appeared, as if out of nowhere, her presence casting a chill over the warm, sunny day. "Helen, darling, it's been too long," Clara said, her voice oozing fake sweetness as she approached me. "I have nothing to say to you, Clara. Whatever game you're playing, I'm not interested," I replied, turning to leave, but she stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "Oh, come now, Helen. I just wanted to catch up. After all, we have so much history together," she said, her smile sharp as a knife. "I'm not interested in revisiting history, especially not with you. What do you want, Clara?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. Clara's demeanor changed, her smile fading into a look of smug satisfaction. "I just thought you should know Mark and I are back together, and this time nothing will stand in our way, not even you." Her words were meant to wound, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. "Congratulations, Clara. I hope you're very happy together. Now, if you'll excuse me." As I walked away, I could feel Clara's eyes boring into my back, her silence more telling than any words could be. It was clear she was plotting something, but I was determined not to fall into whatever trap she was setting. The next few days were tense. I bolstered my defenses, both legally and personally, preparing for whatever Clara had planned. The attack, when it came, was both brazen and underhanded. Clara went to the press, spinning a tale of a bitter ex-wife harassing the happy couple, trying to paint me as the villain in their twisted narrative. Her interviews were filled with lies and insinuations, designed to tarnish my reputation and elicit sympathy for herself and Mark. I was furious, but I knew that responding in anger would only play into her hands. Instead, I contacted my lawyer, ready to fight back with the truth. "We'll issue a statement refuting her claims, backed up by evidence. Clara's attempts to manipulate public opinion won't stand up to scrutiny," my lawyer assured me. The statement was released, detailing the truth of our history, backed by undeniable evidence of Clara's lies and manipulations. The public's reaction was swift and overwhelmingly in my favor. Clara's narrative crumbled, her credibility shattered by her own deceit, but I knew this victory was only a battle in the ongoing war. Clara wouldn't give up so easily, and neither would I. I was ready for whatever she threw my way, my resolve strengthened by each challenge. As the dust settled, I realized that this ordeal had changed me. No longer the woman who could be betrayed and discarded, I had emerged stronger, more resilient. Clara and Mark had tried to break me, but instead they had forged me into someone new. I was Helen, and I was unbreakable. Let them come with their worst. I would face it head-on, and I would prevail. The path ahead might be uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was the master of my destiny, and nothing and no one could take that away from me. A few weeks after my public rebuttal of Clara's accusations, I received an unexpected invitation to a mutual friend's art gallery opening. The buzz was that both Clara and Mark would be there. It was a deliberate setup, no doubt, a showdown they presumed I wouldn't dare face. They were wrong. I arrived at the gallery, the air thick with anticipation. Whispers filled the room as guests speculated on the night's drama. I kept my composure, greeting our host before scanning the crowd. It didn't take long to spot Clara and Mark, ensconced in a circle of onlookers, playing the part of the besieged couple. Clara spotted me first, her expression a mix of surprise and disdain. Mark's reaction was more subdued, a hint of unease in his eyes. I approached, my steps measured, my heart calm. "Helen, what a pleasant surprise," Clara said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Clara. After all, I hear we have you to thank for the drama of the evening," I replied, my tone light, belying the tension. Mark finally spoke, his voice strained. "Helen, let's not do this here. It's neither the time nor the place." "For once I agree with you, Mark, but let's be clear, any drama tonight is solely on Clara's shoulders, I said, locking eyes with him briefly before turning my attention back to Clara. Clara laughed, a hollow sound that echoed oddly in the crowded room. Please, Helen, you think you've exposed me, but you've only played into our hands. Mark and I are stronger than ever. Your little games can't touch us. It's not a game, Clara. It's my life. A life you both tried to destroy, but here I am standing strong. Can you say the same? I challenged, my gaze unwavering. The circle of onlookers had grown, hanging on every word. Clara, sensing she was losing ground, leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for me. You may think you've won, Helen, but this isn't over. I'll make sure of it. Threats, Clara? Really? You should know by now they don't work on me. Not anymore, I replied, stepping back, ready to walk away from their toxicity once and for all. As I turned to leave, Mark's voice stopped me. Helen, wait, please. I paused, facing him, an eyebrow raised in question. I'm sorry for everything, Mark said, his voice barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. It was the closest thing to a concession I would ever get from him. I nodded, accepting his apology, not because it changed anything, but because it was time to close this chapter of my life. Goodbye, Mark. Goodbye, Clara. I wish you all the happiness you deserve. With that, I walked away, leaving the whispers and stares behind. The night air felt refreshing, cleansing, as if with each step I was walking further away from my past and into a future of my own making. In the weeks that followed, Clara's attempts to retaliate were half-hearted, the fight gone out of her. It seemed my confrontation had finally broken her spirit. Mark disappeared from the public eye, his apology at the gallery the last I heard of him. I had emerged victorious, not through revenge or malice, but by standing up for myself, by refusing to be a victim. Clara and Mark had sought to destroy me, but in the end, they were the architects of their own downfall. As I moved forward with my life, I did so with a new sense of purpose and strength. I had faced my demons and won, proving to myself and the world that I was not someone to be underestimated. I was Helen, and I was finally free.
It seems my mother-in-law got wind that we'd bought a house when she called out of the blue with a shocking proposal. On the other end of the line, I could hear my sister-in-law's amused laughter as my mother-in-law expressed her desire to move in with us. Does she think her laughter is unnoticed? Honestly, living with my mother-in-law and the rest of the family is the last thing I want. I thought my husband felt the same way, but now that they know about our new home, are they assuming that we'll all live together? The thought that my husband might agree with them fills me with dread, but I am determined not to give in to their plans. If they are trying to manipulate me, I'm ready to turn the tables. Reflecting on my past challenges, I vowed to get even. I am Nancy Deborah, 32 years old, and an employee at a major financial corporation. I married Mason 4 years ago. We haven't started a family yet for specific reasons, but it's a mutual decision we take seriously. Mason and I are dedicated to our careers, striving for progress every day. We plan to settle our professional lives first, then focus on building a home and a stable environment for our future children. We've decided to revisit the idea of having kids once our careers are more established, a decision we've made sincerely, sharing our true feelings and thoughts. Now, as we prepare for that future, I recall all my past efforts. Recently, a major project at work that I had meticulously planned was a success, and my promotion was confirmed. My salary, already decent, increased significantly. Mason, though not promoted, also received a significant raise due to his tenure. With both of our incomes rising, it felt like the perfect time to turn our long-held dream of owning a home into reality. So I approached Mason to discuss our next steps. I think it might be time for us to start thinking about getting our place. What do you think, Mason? His response was instantly enthusiastic. Is it time already? I could hear the excitement in his voice. He continued, I've been thinking about it too. But since I haven't been promoted yet, I was a bit hesitant to bring it up. Don't worry about that, I reassured him. It's not like only one of us needs to be earning. I was thinking we could even put the house in my name since I'm earning more now. Really? Well, if you're okay with it, then yes, let's do it in your name. Mason agreed with a smile. All right, let's proceed with that. Let's go check out some model homes on our next day off. Sounds great. Let's not miss this chance, I replied, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for having Mason by my side. We share the same values, and at moments like these, I know I made the right choice. The following week, we made an appointment to view model homes as planned. We explored various designs, expanding our vision for what our own home could be. Over the weekends, we started sketching out simple floor plans together and doing online research. During a recent visit to a construction company, they suggested that instead of leaving everything to them, it would be better if we developed our ideas to ensure our home truly reflected our personalities. Mason and I loved the idea, though we admitted to each other that our knowledge of architecture and design was quite limited. Still, we were eager to learn and started to shape our vision. Even with the research, applying what we learned took time. We balanced this new project with our work, taking breaks when needed. Then, unexpectedly, the doorbell rang. Thinking it was just a delivery, I opened the door only to find my mother-in-law standing there. Huh. Mother, what brings you here so suddenly? I asked, surprised by her unannounced visit. Without a word, she removed her shoes and made herself at home. Mason, hearing her, came out surprised. Mom, what's up? Didn't Nancy tell you? I spoke to her about it a little while ago over the phone, his mother replied, looking a bit puzzled. Mason turned to me. Maybe Nancy forgot to mention it. That's not true, Mom, I interjected quickly. It's not forgetfulness. I've just been incredibly busy with work. Nancy handles both her job and our household responsibilities, keeping her mind constantly buzzing with tasks. You're such a thoughtful person, Mason. Your late father would have been proud of how you support her, my mother-in-law remarked with genuine admiration. Then she asked Mason, why did you come over today? With a content smile, she pulled a travel brochure from her bag, spread it on the table, and pointed to a page marked with a post-it note. Listen, Mason, I've always dreamed of seeing Niagara Falls. Would you take me there, please? She asked excitedly, taking us both by surprise. Mason and I were speechless, mouths hanging open as she continued to push. Come on, Mason, think of it as an act of filial piety, she urged, seeing Mason's flustered expression. Wait a minute, Mom. It's a bit sudden to spring a trip on us, Mason managed to say. You could come too, Nancy. I was thinking of asking Anna, but if Mason's coming, we could make it a family trip, she added casually. Hannah is Mason's sister. What are you talking about? Mason responded, slightly confused. Nancy is here, and I can't just take time off from work. Plus, it feels odd for me to finance a trip for you and my sister. Not odd at all, his mother countered swiftly. Spending money on family is a wonderful thing, don't you think? She said, turning to me for support. Though taken aback, I stood my ground. Using one's own money for the family isn't bad, but imposing it on others is different, I replied. What do you mean by that? Are you suggesting I'm trying to extort travel expenses from Mason? She asked, her tone shifting. I tried to clarify without sounding harsh. I didn't mean it like that, but it did sound like you were expecting us to cover the trip, I explained. That's terrible, Nancy. I had no such intention, she exclaimed, clearly upset. You're making me out to be the villain in front of Mason. I didn't mean to call you a villain, I quickly assured her, trying to diffuse the tension. I responded truthfully to the question posed. Okay, there's no need for excuses, Nancy. Why are you so heartless? You must not like me, do you? My mother-in-law accused, her eyes icy as she glared at me. This kind of situation is not new. Whenever she visits, she often finds a reason to ask for money, which she then tends to squander with Anna, Mason's sister. While the idea of supporting family sounds noble, what happens here feels more like extortion. This dynamic shifts when Mason gives them money out of kindness. Still, I've never been fond of his mother's or sister's demanding ways. Mason once told me that after his father passed away, his mother and sister's behavior became quite selfish. His father, who died when Mason was in high school, used to manage the finances carefully. With his absence, there was no one left to oversee their spending, which included freely using the life insurance money. Anna works part-time and earns a modest salary, which makes their financial situation precarious. This is often her excuse for showing up at our door, claiming life is tough, or she needs a break and wants to travel, subtly hinting at needing money from Mason. Before I married Mason, it seemed he was constantly at the mercy of his mother's demands. There was a dependency there, a reliance on the care she provided after his father's death. But since marrying me, Mason has begun to see their true colors. Even though they frequently ask for money, Mason has been making a concerted effort to refuse. Recently, he started to assert himself more with his mother in response to her spiteful comments like, "You don't like me, do you?" Or "Why should I be nice to such an uncharming daughter-in-law?" Mason stood his ground. "Just because you're my mother doesn't mean you can speak badly of Nancy. Didn't she just answer your question honestly?" "You're taking Nancy's side," his mother exclaimed, shocked. "What are you talking about?" "I think you're in the wrong here, Mom." "That's so unfair," she retorted, her voice full of indignation. "Surely Nancy must have poisoned your mind against me. Poor thing, you were such a kind child before we got married." "I'm telling you, that's not the reason." "I'm saying this because I truly believe it," Mason responded firmly, taking his mother by surprise. She wasn't used to being contradicted like this. With a frustrated expression and biting her lower lip, she finally said, "Fine," and left abruptly. "Nancy, I'm sorry I always make you feel uncomfortable." Mason apologized once his mother had departed. "No, it's okay. Hey, you stood up for us this time." I reassured him, "Once we build our own home, we'll be further away. Maybe then we can minimize our interactions with your mom and sister." "Yeah, that would be a relief," Mason agreed, sounding genuinely grateful. The location we were considering for our new home was quite far from our current apartment, which would also be more convenient for our commutes. Currently, our apartment is about 4 train stations away from Mason's parents' house, but the new house would be 3 times farther and require several transfers. The route from the station was also complicated, so unless we gave them the address, they likely wouldn't be able to find it. This move seemed like a perfect opportunity to distance ourselves from the frequent and often uncomfortable family interactions. Later, we submitted our floor plan ideas to the construction company, and 3 months later, construction began. About 8 months after that, our $800,000 dream home was completed. We managed to carve out some time from our busy schedules to pack. A few days before the move, I received a call from my mother-in-law. I was in the middle of packing, so I put her on speakerphone. "Hello," I greeted. "Nancy, when are you moving?" "You bought a house, right?" "I want to live with you," she blurted out, her voice unusually high-pitched, catching me off guard. In the background, I could hear Anna, my sister-in-law, chuckling. "That's great. We can make Nancy work for us every day." "Mom, you came up with a good idea," she snickered. Did they think I couldn't hear them? It was clear they were planning to freeload off our move, imagining an easy life at our expense. Honestly, I had no intention of living with them, and I believe Mason felt the same way. However, discussing our new house with them might have led them to assume we would be living together. The idea that my dear Mason could be colluding with them worries me, but I am determined not to let them dictate our lives. It seems like they're trying to manipulate the situation to their advantage. If that's their plan, I'll have to be one step ahead. I informed them of our moving date, and immediately my mother-in-law and Anna responded with their plans. "We'll come to your apartment in the afternoon on that day. Take us with you in the car and arrange the movers for us too," they demanded, then hung up. Of course, I had no intention of fulfilling their demands. Before I could discuss this with Mason, I turned around to find him already standing there. "Mason, were you listening? I was about to take a break and talk to you about this." "Was that Mom on the phone just now?" he asked. "Yes, I was going to talk to you about that as well. Why did you tell your mother about our new home?" I questioned, a bit surprised. "It's not quite like that," Mason explained. "Last time Mom visited, she saw the floor plan of our new house lying around. She's been pestering me about it every day since, so I eventually gave in." Mason confessed, clearly regretful. "Nancy, I'm sorry. You don't think I intend to live with them, do you?" he quickly added. "Of course not, Mason," I reassured him. "After hearing that phone call, I think it might be better if we cut ties with them." Mason's expression darkened, more furious than I'd ever seen him. It was clear he was on my side, which relieved me immensely. He explained further that his mother had taken a keen interest in the layout of our new home, pretending to inquire casually while bombarding him with questions about the number of rooms and other details. This conversation only solidified our resolve. We agreed it was time to set boundaries and protect our new life together from unwanted intrusions. This resolved me even more to stand up against my mother-in-law's overbearing behavior. I had reached my limit with her dictating terms and causing chaos in our lives, but now it was time to turn the page. I was ready to firmly settle this issue once and for all. So the day of the move came. Mason and I got the movers to transport our belongings in the morning, and we drove to our new home. By the time we finished unloading and arranging everything, it was already past 2:00 p.m. While taking a break, we checked our phones and found dozens of missed calls from my mother-in-law. "She called me too," Mason said, his voice tinged with exhaustion. Then, as if on cue, she called again. I answered, leaving the speakerphone on. "Hello, Nancy. Where are you?" "I told you I'd be at the apartment this afternoon, didn't I?" "Yes, you did say that," I replied calmly. "So what can I do for you?" "What do you mean? You didn't arrange for the movers. I've been waiting at home, and not a single truck has shown up. I had to go to your apartment myself." "Is that so? Well, that's too bad. You know I didn't arrange for any movers," I said, keeping my tone even. "What? That's not the agreement. Where is your new house?" she demanded, clearly flustered. "Do you think I'd tell you?" I responded firmly. There was a stunned silence from her end. She probably thought that as long as Mason was involved, she could manipulate the situation to her favor. But Mason had changed. He was now my staunch ally, committed to severing the unhealthy ties with his family. With all my pent-up frustration ready to be let go, I continued, "Just to let you know, neither Mason nor I have any intention of living with the two of you. From now on, please keep out of our lives." "What are you saying? Your opinion doesn't matter. It's up to Mason to decide. At least tell me where the new house is right now. How are you going to get here without even knowing the address?" "This house is in my name. I have the right to decide who lives here. If you two just barge in, it's trespassing." My mother-in-law was taken aback by my assertiveness, and the silence that followed spoke volumes. It was clear that the dynamics had shifted, and Mason and I were finally taking control of our lives. "And I'll sue you if you trespass," I declared with finality. Her response was incredulous. "Trespassing? How rude to say that about your husband's family." At that point, Mason intervened with a steely tone that I had rarely heard from him before. "Family? The family member I respected, my father, is gone. What remains now doesn't resemble the family I once knew." "What are you saying, Mason?" My mother-in-law faltered, her voice tinged with disbelief. "After that last phone call, I've had enough. Just sharing blood with you is embarrassing. From now on, my family is Dave and Nancy. I no longer consider you two parts of my family," Mason declared firmly. "Wait, Mason, don't say such things," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Don't bother us again, got it?" With that, Mason ended the call and didn't wait for her response. He quickly adjusted his phone settings to block her calls. "Hey, Mason, are you really okay with this?" I asked him, concerned yet supportive. "Yeah, I finally realized that Mom was just using me." "I feel completely relieved now," Mason said, a genuine sense of freedom washing over his face. He looked truly relieved, finally free from the manipulative ties that had bound him. That was the turning point for us as a couple, successfully severing the unhealthy connections with my mother-in-law and her daughter. Following this, they were forced to adapt drastically. Mason ceased all support, cutting off their fallback option. Without Mason's assistance, they struggled financially. My sister-in-law's part-time income wasn't sufficient, and my mother-in-law, long a housewife, was compelled to find part-time work. Unaccustomed to the working world, she found it challenging and often faced disapproval at her new job. Meanwhile, Mason and I enjoyed a peaceful life in our new home. There were no more unexpected visits from my mother-in-law, and our lives were truly stress-free. I am endlessly grateful to Mason for believing in me and for his courage in cutting ties with his toxic relatives. Whatever challenges may come our way in the future, I trust that Mason and I will support each other and navigate through life together as a united team. After my father's funeral, our family got together to talk about the inheritance. My father had been a respected major shareholder in a company. During the meeting, my brother-in-law, Jason, suddenly spoke up. "My wife, Emily, your eldest daughter, should get the stocks in a total of $5 million, he argued firmly. As my brother-in-law and sister seemed eager about getting a large sum of money, the lawyer, with a bit of surprise, explained, "Emily doesn't legally have the right to the inheritance. My name is John. I'm a 42-year-old salary worker living with my wonderful wife and 2 children. My father was well known as a major shareholder in a company and was still working at 78. I have an older sister named Emily, who has always caused our parents a lot of worry with her repeated troublesome behavior. Even though she is middle-aged, she hasn't settled into a stable career and lives a selfish life. I've always felt uneasy and frustrated with my sister's actions, so I keep my distance. When Emily turned 50, she suddenly brought home a young man and announced, 'I'm getting married.' The man, Alex, was much younger than my sister. While he was attractive, he seemed irresponsible, which didn't impress me. Emily boldly demanded money from our father for her wedding, which she quickly spent. She shamelessly asked for more money, causing our father more stress. 'It's my inheritance anyway, so what's wrong with using it now?' she said defiantly. I watched my sister's behavior coldly. Not long after her marriage, our father suddenly fell ill while playing golf and passed away quietly a few days later. Losing him so suddenly was a deep sorrow for me. His unexpected death shocked his many friends, and the phone kept ringing nonstop. Telling myself there was no time for tears, I took charge of the funeral arrangements for my grieving mother. As usual, my sister left home and refused to help with the funeral. Exhausted after the funeral, my mother and I barely had time to rest when the lawyer came to our house the next day to discuss the inheritance. We already knew that our father had left a will. Unaware of this, my sister Emily and her husband Jason, who seemed overly confident, barged into the discussion and made a shocking statement. Jason, looking triumphant, said, "The stocks and the $5 million inheritance will go to my wife, your eldest daughter, so don't think about using it as you please." He boasted confidently. My mother and I were bewildered by this absurd statement, at a loss for words. Jason, looking smug, exclaimed, "All right, Emily, with this will be rich too." His excitement was barely containable. Far from mourning my father's death, my brother-in-law's jubilant demeanor shocked the lawyer. Emily, looking dissatisfied, questioned, "What kind of reaction is that?" The lawyer, facing them seriously, clarified, "I'm sorry, Emily, but you have no legal right to the inheritance." This news left both my sister and brother-in-law stunned. Emily, visibly angry, raised her voice. "That can't be true." "Emily is the eldest daughter after all," Jason said, revealing his high hopes for the inheritance, a clear hint of greed in his eyes. "Were you not aware Emily is not the biological daughter of the deceased?" Upon hearing this, Emily's face changed dramatically, and she turned to our mother with a questioning gaze. "Mom." At that moment, my mother looked conflicted, as if she couldn't find the right words to say. I had always known that Emily wasn't biologically related to our father, but it seemed she was completely unaware of this fact. Confused, Emily began to shake our mother's shoulders, pleading in a desperate voice, "Mom, what does this mean?" Unperturbed by the shaking, my mother calmly yet firmly replied, "Emily, you are the daughter of my previous husband." As she quietly disclosed the significant fact, Emily, who had always tormented me by saying Dad loves me the most, now wore a face of utter disbelief. Suddenly, Jason interjected, "But if there was an adoption, she would have rights to the inheritance, right?" "That's correct, isn't it, Emily?" he asked, seeking confirmation from my sister. "Yes, that should be the case," Emily replied. However, in front of Emily, our mother slowly shook her head. "No, Emily, we never went through an adoption," my mother stated quietly. At her words, both my sister and brother-in-law once again wore faces of shock. Emily, shaking with anger, cried out, "How could this be? I am the oldest daughter of this family, and Dad even said so." Emily yelled at me, filled with anger, her voice shaking. She continued, "Why do you get to control all of our family's money?" Her words made me furious, and I quickly shot back, "Have you ever thought about how much you made Dad spend? Do you still have something to say?" I said angrily. "Shut up. I'm the daughter of this house. I have every right to the money." "Spending money on a daughter is what parents are supposed to do," she insisted. I was shocked and let out a deep sigh. Normally, spending money on a daughter isn't wrong, but the problem was how much my sister made Dad spend on her debts and other expenses. Then the lawyer, who had been quietly watching, finally spoke up. "How about we let Emily see the will too?" "A will? What are you talking about?" "I don't know anything about a will," Emily responded, confused. Emily's ignorance about the will was her own fault. Dad wanted to discuss the will with the whole family and had asked everyone to be there when it was written, but she ignored this and went out to do other things. When I mentioned this, Jason couldn't hide his anger and glared at Emily. "Why did you do that, Emily? It was important." "So what will you all do?" At this question, my sister and brother-in-law looked at each other and agreed to hear the will. The lawyer then read aloud Dad's will, which clearly named my mother and me as the only inheritors of the entire estate. The will also explained why Emily was not legally adopted. It seemed Dad had originally wanted to accept Emily as a formal family member, but the will detailed his disappointment in her mean actions towards me in childhood and her increasing wastefulness as she grew older. No way. Emily was shocked and speechless. Faced with the reality of having no inheritance rights, she seemed unable to recover from the shock. "What does this mean, Emily? Were you deceiving me, making me believe we'd become rich?" Jason demanded. My mother and sister were stunned, but I wasn't surprised. Jason's dishonest behavior regarding money had always been obvious. He might have married Emily just for her money. "Emily, don't come back here until you have money." "Wait, Jason, don't be so cruel. I believed we'd be rich together." "I'm so disappointed in you," Emily pleaded. Jason roughly pushed past Emily and left the room. Left behind, Emily glared at us with a face full of anger. "Mom, why didn't you adopt me?" she demanded. My mother, struggling to find words, managed to say, "Well, that is why." "Why does Mom get the inheritance? I should have rights too. It's unfair because of Mom's lack of action. Don't you think it's terrible?" Emily cried. My mother quietly murmured, "Emily, it's unfair, too cruel." Emily's cries, with her hair disheveled, were intense enough to scare anyone, but the lawyer remained calm as if it were a normal day. "Why do you get everything? Why nothing for me?" Emily demanded. "Because I'm Dad's biological child," I said. As soon as I said that, Emily, in a fit of rage, reached out to hit me. "It would have been better if you never existed," she screamed. I thought that even if I hadn't been there, Dad would have made the same decision because of Emily's behavior. But before I could argue back, the lawyer quietly intervened. "Emily, please refrain from such actions. Otherwise, I will have to contact the police," he warned her gently. Emily, startled by the mention of the police, calmed down. With a history of minor crimes like shoplifting, she was sensitive to the mention of the authorities. My mother, holding back tears, tried to speak again, but Emily clicked her tongue in frustration and left the room. About 6 months later, the inheritance process was smoothly completed. Emily and Jason initially resisted strongly, but the lawyer's skillful handling left them little room to interfere. Eventually, my mother did give Emily a small amount of money, but it wasn't my place to comment on it. Frustratingly, Emily and Jason then disappeared without a trace. Their blatant greed left our relatives shocked and disappointed. One day, my wife suggested we take my mother and daughter out for a pleasant meal. Since losing Dad, my mother had been down, but spending time with her beloved granddaughter brightened her up. "Mom, why don't you come and live with us?" I proposed to my mother, but she hesitated. "Well, Emily might come by occasionally." "Emily only comes here to beg for money." "You shouldn't indulge her," I replied. My mother's hesitation was understandable. Despite her issues, Emily was her irreplaceable daughter. If we went to our family home, there was a chance Emily would cause trouble again. Understanding these concerns, I gave my mother some time to think as I drove her home. Surprisingly, there were lights on at the usually empty house. Thinking Emily might have returned, I parked the car cautiously in the garage. We got out of the car and started walking towards the entrance. Suddenly, a car rushed towards us. "Watch out!" My daughter, who was leading the way, yelled. Instinctively, I threw myself to protect my wife, barely avoiding the car. Ouch, I groaned in pain. Fortunately, the car only grazed me, but I was thrown against a flower bed. The car eventually crashed into the garage entrance and came to a stop. My wife, with a worried expression, asked, "Are you okay, Dad?" My mother trembled at the entrance, unable to speak due to surprise and concern. The situation was chaotic. I was rushed to the hospital by ambulance and ended up staying overnight. It turned out Jason was the one who caused the accident. He told the police he mistook the brake for the accelerator, but I wasn't convinced. During this time, Emily visited the hospital with my mother. While my mother was sending flowers, Hai looked at me and said, "You're surprisingly tough, aren't you?" She muttered, seemingly disappointed. I thought to myself, just as I suspected, and provocatively responded, "If I had died in the accident, Mom would have inherited everything." Disappointed at my words, Emily clearly looked uneasy. "I know what you were expecting," I continued as Emily averted her eyes, looking down. "But you see, Mom intends to renounce her inheritance, so your hopes won't come to fruition." As I said this, Emily stared back at me in astonishment. It seemed unbelievable to her that someone would willingly give up what they could receive. "I have a wife and kids, so Mom says the inheritance should go to them." "That's what a parent should do," I explained. "But that's—" Emily started to object, her words trailing off. "I've made a will, following Dad's example. Unfortunately, the inheritance that I should have will no longer go to Mom." At these words, Emily shivered, unable to hide her agitation. Unable to conceal her anger, Emily raised her voice. "Give me a share. It's $5 million, isn't it?" When I said no firmly, Emily got really angry and grabbed my shirt. "You should give me half at least. I'm your real sister," she shouted. She kept yelling loudly about wanting half of the money we inherited, but I felt sorry for her. Being so greedy would have disappointed Dad. "Can't you see that?" I said calmly to her. Emily's face turned red quickly, and she tried to grab my throat. Just then, our mom came back into the room and yelled, "Emily, what are you doing?" When she heard our mom, the nurses came in and took Emily away. Mom seemed to want to protect Emily, but Emily left, saying mean things to her. "What did I do wrong to raise her?" Mom said sadly. Not long after that, we found out that Mom had gotten sick. We felt sad seeing her get weaker, so we started helping out more with things like driving her places and doing chores. This seemed to make Emily even angrier. She might have found out from Mom or my wife when she asked for money. One day, Emily called me unexpectedly on my phone. "We'll take care of Mom from now on. You don't need to come anymore," she said. "What do you mean, all of a sudden?" I asked. "I've already decided," she replied. I was worried about leaving Mom in Emily's care because Emily struggled with basic household tasks, let alone caring for someone who was sick. I quickly called Mom to understand what was going on. Surprisingly, Mom said Jason had experience taking care of people, and she felt okay for the time being. I felt relieved, but then Mom suddenly had to go to the hospital in an ambulance because of a mistake with her medicine dosage. We all rushed to the hospital and found Mom very weak. I asked my wife to stay with her and went back to our family home. When I got there, the house was a mess. Mom couldn't even cook her favorite meals anymore. The fridge was empty, and it seemed like Emily had fired the helper without telling anyone. I regretted expecting anything from Emily and felt angry. When I checked Mom's safe, a lot of money had been taken out of her bank account. Thankfully, the money from the inheritance was safe somewhere else, but the money Mom used for everyday things was almost all gone. I quickly gathered important documents like bank books, cards, and seals, and went back to the hospital to explain everything to Mom and figure out what to do next. Emily has, Mom struggled to say. It seemed she didn't know about the money being taken out of her account, and she was shocked when I mentioned the mistake with her medicine. Mom said Jason had prepared it, and her expression became weak and darker. I think it's best if we don't let Emily back into the house, I told Mom. Jason, Mom replied, looking confused. I explained my worries further. I promised to take care of things, but the house is in such a mess, Mom. You've lost a lot of weight. You must not have been eating well. Seeing her reaction, I gently suggested, Mom, let's live together. Let's build a new house and stay there together. Mom started crying heavily at my words, but soon after, her condition got worse, and despite the doctor's efforts, she passed away. Heartbroken over what Emily did, I went back to the family home to get ready for Mom's funeral. I found out that all the valuable things were gone. It turned out Emily and her husband, who were having money problems, took them. Seeing the empty house, I felt shocked and angry. We have to fix this no matter what, I decided firmly. The day after Mom's funeral, I was supposed to meet Emily and the lawyer at the law office to talk about the inheritance. Emily, feeling superior, confidently said, I have the right to Mom's inheritance, unfortunately for you. I couldn't help but laugh at her misunderstanding. She was making a big mistake. The lawyer opened the will, and as soon as we saw what was written, Emily's face turned pale with shock. No, how could this happen? Emily exclaimed. The will clearly says you're not getting anything, the lawyer told Emily. Jason, furious, demanded, What's that supposed to mean? She's her daughter. You can't fool us. Give us the inheritance now. He banged the table in anger. I calmly asked him, Jason, did you do something to Mom? I didn't do anything, he replied dismissively. Then why was her medication messed up? I pressed. But Jason just brushed it off, saying, That doesn't matter. John, I can't believe I'm getting nothing from Mom's inheritance. What did you do? I can't pay for my apartment right now, Emily said. Her words shocked me. I realized Emily had assumed she'd get something, even though she didn't show up right after Mom died. Emily, desperate, asked the lawyer, Is there really nothing for me? The lawyer sighed deeply and said, Yes, the will is clear. Then the lawyer explained the legal stuff about the mandatory share. It turned out that after taking away the money Emily had taken out and sold without permission, there wasn't much left in the inheritance. Actually, this was part of a plan I had talked about with the lawyer before. Emily was shocked and protested loudly. There can't be so little. Mom and I had purposely not told Emily about this. In reality, most of Mom's stuff had been given to my daughters while she was alive, so there wasn't much left to inherit. But Emily didn't want to accept it and kept complaining. Like with Dad, I felt really angry with Emily, who only took from others without doing anything herself. It's so disrespectful to just take money when Mom thought you'd take care of her. Taking care of someone costs money, and you don't get that, I told her. Then show me what you spent on Mom. If it's really necessary, I'll pay for it, Emily said. When I said that, Emily got shaky and her face changed. There's no proof without receipts. We can't agree to those expenses, I told her. While Emily was silent, Jason attempted to use a gentle tone to sway things his way. John, think about it. Your sister really needs help right now. Wouldn't it be good to lend a hand? I'm sorry, but I can't agree to that, I said firmly. Jason was shocked by my direct refusal and stayed quiet for a bit. I didn't hold back my feelings and openly admitted, honestly, I've been treated badly by my sister for a long time. I almost feel satisfied now. But your siblings, right, Can't you try to work together a bit? If the plan we had made earlier had worked, Emily would have gotten all the inheritance, Jason said. What plan? I asked. Jason went on, it's Emily's fault things didn't work out. I was supposed to get a new car, but now I only have enough for repairs. Emily panicked and tried to stop him, but it was too late. That sounds like fraud, I said, seeing where it was going. What? That's against the law. We got permission to record this meeting beforehand, the lawyer explained. Jason went pale, realizing his mistake. I said firmly, I'll be taking legal action about what you just said. That's ridiculous. There's no proof, Jason protested. Proof? What you said is proof enough, I replied. Emily cried out in agony, shaking. Jason, you fool. What do we do now? This is all your fault. As a result, Jason faced legal consequences, and his past wrongdoings came to light, leading to his arrest. Although Emily seemed to be involved too, she struggled to pay her apartment rent. When she asked relatives for help, they all said no. Meanwhile, I kept working steadily, not letting the situation affect me, and looked forward to small joys like stock dividends. Call me Diana. When I was 9, life hit the fan. Now, I'm not using fancy words here, just telling it straight. It was me, my little sister Lizzie who was 2, Mom, and the man I'd called Dad up until that world-flipping day. See, Dad had this DNA test done out of nowhere, really, and boom. Our family wasn't a family in the way we thought. Dad walked in, papers in hand, face all kinds of twisted up with, I don't know, anger, shock, sadness. Mom first went all pale, eyes wide, then she tried to shrug it off. But who was she kidding? When she saw Dad wasn't buying her act, she crumbled like a house of cards, tears and all, spilling the beans about not knowing who my real dad was and about still being in the picture with Lizzie's dad. That's how the domino fell. Dad split from Mom, but he didn't slam the door on us. He wasn't heartless. Kept sending money our way because in his heart, he still saw us as his kids, I guess. Love's weird like that. Mom didn't waste any time, though, married Lizzie's dad George quick as you like. Lizzie became the apple of his eye the second the ink dried on their marriage certificate, and he made it official by adopting her and cutting me out like last night's pizza. For me, it was like I became a ghost in my own home, invisible. Our house, it was less of a home and more of a crash pad for me. Mom was all about her new life with stepdad and Lizzie. They were like the picture-perfect 3, and there was me, just sort of there. I tried to be the good big sister, but she was being raised like she was an only child, princess costumes, bedtime stories, all smiles. Me, I was lucky if I got a good night hollered in my general direction. The dinner table was like a minefield. I'd sit quietly, trying to make myself smaller while they chatted about their days, about everything and nothing. I just pick up my food, not if someone accidentally made contact. Are you going to eat that? Stepdad would grunt, eyeing my chicken like he hadn't been fed in weeks. No, you can have it, I'd mumble, sliding my plate over. Hey, watch it, you're making a mess. He'd growl as a pea rolled off the table. Mom was no better. If I tried to talk to her about school or friends, she'd give me that nod-smile combo that adults do when they're not listening. Sure, honey, she'd say without missing a beat, in her phone scroll. The bell rang, cutting through the chatter of the hallway, signaling the end of the day. I gripped my backpack tighter, shuffling out with the rest, everyone pushing to be first to freedom. That's when I saw him, leaned up against the old metal fencing by the school gates, my dad. Dad, I said, peering close as if my eyes were playing tricks. Diana, he grunted, a curt nod in place of a smile. I stopped a few feet away, wary. "What are you doing here?" "He got something to tell you." He ran a rough hand through his hair, which seemed more unruly than I remembered. "Can we go somewhere? Talk?" Glancing around, wondering if any of my friends were witnessing this reunion, I nodded towards my usual hangout. "There's a diner around the corner." The walk was silent, the clunk of his boots on pavement outpacing any attempt at small talk. The diner wasn't much, but it was a slice of familiarity compared to the man walking beside me. Once seated in a booth with peeling vinyl at a wobbly table, the waitress came over, eyeing Dad somehow suspiciously and me with concern. "The usual Diana?" she asked, her voice a welcome sound. I nodded. "Yeah, and whatever he'll have." Dad grunted again, not even picking up the menu. "Coffee, black," he said. I droned my fingers on the table, buying time. Eventually, I burst out, "You can't just show up like this." He didn't flinch. Didn't plan on it. "Thought you ought to know, though. I can't have kids, Diana." The words hummed there like heavy smoke. I stopped drumming my fingers. "So," he shifted uncomfortably. "Though you might want to know, be with your old man now that I know for sure you're the only one I'll have." My heart was doing strange flips. "Just like that, I drop everything and come with you." "It's not nothing, Diana," he said, his voice rising a touch. "Figured it meant something to you, especially Mom and George." Flashed in my mind along with the mound of unwashed laundry and the echoing silence every time I walked in the door. I sighed. "You got room for one more at your place?" "You bet," he said, shoulders relaxing. I got space. "And what would I do? Just hang out while you work?" The practical side of me needed details. "You go to school, I work. We'll figure the rest out." School. That was something I planned to finish no matter what. "Fine, but I'm finishing high school. No derailing that." He gave a small nod as if it was decided there and then. "Fine," I chewed my lip. Term was ending in a couple of months. It wouldn't be too bad. I convinced myself I'd make new friends or keep in touch with the old. Somehow, Mom and George, well, they have been more like roommates than family lately. Might not even notice I'm gone till rent's due. "Okay," I said, a strange lightness taking over. "Okay, let's do this." "But Dad, this can't be one of those fly-by-night schemes." "I'm serious." He met my eyes, and for a second, I saw something that might have passed for conviction. "I'm serious too, kiddo. Time to make things right." We left the diner with a plan forming. I was scared, but the idea of starting over with him, it felt like a real chance. As we walked back to the school to collect the rest of my things, I figured this might just be the new beginning I'd been craving. Dad and I live in a new city now. It's different, cold sometimes and loud, but it's home. Dad started his own business, something to do with tech and gadgets. It was just a bunch of computers at first, but it really picked up. People talk about him now like he's someone. I guess he is. I go to this local school. It's all right, I guess. Not much to say about it, except I'm there to get grades, and I'm doing good, real good. Got to, right? Dad set the bar up high with his success and all. I got to keep up, make him proud, that's the goal. And me. Dentistry is where it's a lot for me. Can't explain it. Really, just something about fixing people up, giving them a smile to be proud of. Sounds good, doesn't it? Dad's all for it. When I first told him, I thought he'd be like, "Dentistry, really?" But no, he was all, "If that's what you want, kiddo, then go for it." That's Dad for you, supportive as ever. My Mom and George, they're like a TV show I used to watch, but forgot how it goes. It's just static now, and I don't remember much about them. Doesn't matter though, we've got our own thing going on here. Another test. How do you do it? Dad's voice makes me jump as he comes into my room, his eyes all tired from work but smiling. Study, isn't it? Just hit the books and the answers stick, I say, shrugging like it's no big deal. Dad chuckles, the lines by his eyes crinkling up. You got your old man's brains, that's for sure. I roll my eyes. Yeah, just means I'll have to pick a fancy college for dentistry. They don't let any dummy in. Hey, you pick the college, I'll figure out the rest. He pats my head and then turns serious. Don't you worry about that. The thing is, I don't worry. Not about this. Dad's good for his word, always has been. There's this cool thing I've been doing, volunteering at a local dentist's office. Sounds boring, but trust me, it's not. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm there watching, learning, sometimes handing them tools like I know what I'm doing. It feels right, like I belong. I don't go out much, not a party person. I've got Emma and Zach at school, and that's plenty. Emma's all about basketball while Zach is into his music. They're cool, even if we don't hang out much outside of school. So when are you going to invite us over? Emma bumps my shoulder as we're walking out of class. I want to see if your dad's place looks as techy as you say. I shrug. You know we're pretty busy most of the time, but yeah, maybe. Zach is grinning, his headphones around his neck. Busy studying teeth, huh? If you ever need a guinea pig, he taps his front tooth. No way, I snort. I am not starting with your mouth. Days blend together, school and dentistry. It's like a rhythm, home, school, teeth stuff. But it's nice, predictable. I like it. I like knowing where I stand and where I'm headed. It's a good life. Dad and we're doing okay here. Business, school, future dentist stuff, it's all pieces of this new life. And I'm thinking, as I fall asleep with my dentistry book spread out around me, I'm really looking forward to what comes next. I'm 32 now. Year by year, the image of my dad in his prime fades a bit more. The edges blur like a photograph left too long in the sun. He's been gone for a few years, taken by a sickness that chewed him up from the inside. Damn, it made me mad, fists clenched, teeth gritted kind of mad. You see, I've been around medicine my whole life, with all this knowledge and not a penny spared on treatment. But still, the guy couldn't beat the odds. Life's a real piece of work, huh? It kicks you down and expects you to get up and say thank you. But I've always been a fighter. Dad used to say that, told me I got it from him. So after he passed, I let the pain fuel me and ran my own race. And now, here I am, a doctor at a dental clinic with my name on the door, inheriting everything Dad owned that did make things smoother. I won't lie, money talks in this world, and it's a lot louder when you're trying to keep a business afloat. I kicked ass to get to where I'm at, and Dad's inheritance just padded the fall a bit when things got rough. My clinic's the talk of town. People come in with all sorts of issues. A chipped tooth here, a cavity there. I see it all, fix what I can. But it's not just smiles I mend, oh no. People tell you things when they're sitting in that chair, looking up at the ceiling, trying not to think about the drill in their mouth. They talk about life, the raw, unpolished realness of it. I like that. Makes every day different. Like this one guy, let's call him Joe. Burly fellow with tattoos all the way up his arms and a frown that looked permanent. Came in for a root canal, tough as nails, or so he thought. All right, Joe, open wide and let's take a look at the troublemaker, I'd say. My damn tooth's been killing me, he grunted, mouth already full of dental equipment. Can't chew my steak proper. Can't have that, I said, matching his straightforwardness. Let me fix you up right quick. By the end of the appointment, after some drilling and a whole lot of tough guy grunts, he was singing a different tune. "Doc, you're a miracle worker," Joel mumbled through the gauze in his mouth. "Go easy on the steak for a while, yeah." I told him, handing him a mirror to check out my handiwork. "A job well done." If I may say so myself, that's the drill, my day in a nutshell. But it's not just teeth, it's the people behind them that keep the job interesting. So yeah, life goes on. I miss Dad every damn day, but I reckon he'd be proud. Proud that his little girl didn't just crumble. I look forward and push on. That's what you have to do, no use dwelling on the ifs. And the wise you deal with what's in front of you, one day, 1-to-1 heartache at a time. The sun was setting when I heard the knock. I wasn't expecting anyone, let alone Mom and Lizzie. Their sudden appearance felt like a gust of wind before a storm. "You got a nice place here," said Lizzie as she pushed past me like she owned the place. Her eyes were hungry, taking in every detail of my living room. "Hi, honey," Mom said, less bold but with a look that told me she had something on her mind. We were just in the neighborhood. I doubted that. They lived in another city. "What brings you here?" I asked, even though I had a nagging suspicion. "We need to talk, Diana," Lizzie cut in, plopping down on my sofa with no invitation. "I'm planning to go to college." I raised an eyebrow. "That's good to hear, Lizzie, but why do I feel like there's a but coming up?" She didn't hesitate. "But I need money, sis. I want to get into college, do something with my life." That struck a chord. I used to be in those shoes, staring up a mountain that felt impossible to climb. "Look, I want to help," I said, "but money isn't something you should take lightly." Mom chimed in, "Your sister's trying to do something with her life. You could make it easier for her." I felt the walls closing in. This felt wrong, just handing over cash without knowing if it would actually go to pay for college. But then again, this was family. "How much do you need?" I asked, already regretting the question. Lizzie's grimace turned into a grin. "Not much. 25 grand should cover the first couple years." I nearly choked. 25,000. That's a lot of money, Lizzie. "Don't act like it's a big deal for you." She snapped back. "You got it." That stung. Just because I had made something of myself didn't mean I had money to throw around. But looking at Lizzie, I saw the shadows of my own past, uncertain, scared. I sighed. "I'll give you the money, but on one condition. I will send it directly to the college when you enroll." Lizzie squirmed. "I haven't picked a place yet. I just need the money." "I'll handle the rest," her eyes dodging mine. The air felt heavy, like right before a storm breaks. "You don't trust me," her voice rose. "It's not about trust," I countered, but even as I said it, I knew it was. "I just want to make sure it's used right, Lizzie." There was a cold silence until Mom chimed in, tired of the back and forth. "We're not here to scam you." I took a breath, feeling cornered. Okay. I went to my desk, logged into my account, and did the transfer there. $25,000 for school. Lizzie's eyes lit up with a mix of victory and guilt. "Thanks, I won't forget this." But it was Mom's quick, greedy smile that stayed with me long after they left. I sat there, feeling a blend of worry and disappointment, hoping I hadn't just made a huge mistake. For months, I'd been on the phone with Mom and my sister back in our hometown. It felt good to help them out, sending a few $100 when I could. But when October rolled in, something in my gut told me to check up on Sis and her college situation. One afternoon, I called her, my voice casual as I asked about her classes. But like a slippery fish, she wriggled out of the topic, and before I could press on, she hung up. I frowned at my phone, a suspicious gnawing in my mind. Next thing, I'm stalking her social media like some sort of detective. There she was, all smiles, decked out in threads that screamed money, but not a single selfie in her college gear. Enough was enough. I hit the dial on Kara's number, my old buddy from the block. Kara, it's me, Diana. What's the deal with my sister? How is she doing in college? Her voice came out flat. Your sis, college girl. She's strutting around here like she's in some sort of fashion show. You should see the bags they carry. Notebooks, all bling. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Played for a fool. I was burning with a need to confront them, to yell until I was hoarse. I'd been dialing Lizzie all day, hitting redial more times than I cared to count. The same with Mom. Neither bothered to pick up. Each ignored calls stacked bricks in the wall they were building between us. When I went online hunting for a trace of them, my messages bounced back like I was some stranger. Now I was locked out, and it stung like hell. Hurt simmered and bubbled over into a rage that iced my veins. They'd conned me. The doorbell rang like a warning siren that I didn't want to heed. There on my doorstep, my mother and sister stood, their appearances a bit too polished for a casual visit. I could feel the weight of their expectations before a word even slipped past their lips. Without an invite, they barged in as if it was their right. They settled on my couch and began to look at my living room. Need money for college, Lizzie blurted out not 2 minutes into the so-called visit. Her eyes didn't meet mine, and why would they? Liars have a hard time looking you in the eye. Yeah, that's rich considering, I said, crossing my arms over my chest. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Diana, you don't understand. What, that you're both liars? I cut her off. My voice was colder than I anticipated. It was odd but liberating. You got no right to talk to us like that, Diana, Lizzie piped up, her voice getting sharp. We're family. That card's expired, I shot back. Listen here. I didn't let her finish. I did for a long time. I listened and gave and got nothing but a lie. We're your blood, and you owe us that much, my sister said, her voice hitching up a notch. I couldn't help but laugh then, not because it was funny, but because the level of their delusion was staggering. You think I owe you for spending my money on everything but what you claimed. For lying, for treating me like an ATM. I fixed them with a look that felt as if it could peel the paint from the walls. There was silence for a moment, and then my mother's face twisted into a scowl. Ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you, done to me, I corrected. My sister stood up. We don't need this. If you're going to be a bastard about helping your family, well, if the shoe fits. I interrupted her, then pointed at the door. Leave. I'm done being your free ride. They were on their feet now, faces red, not with shame, but with anger. You'll regret this, my mother hissed. I already regret plenty, but cutting you off ain't on that list. I walked to the door, holding it open. Get out. As they stomped past me, their parting words were threats about making me pay in ways money couldn't cover. Once they left, the silence in the apartment was heavy, but it was mine and mine alone. I leaned against the closed door after they were gone and exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was done. It should have felt like a victory, but wars with family tend to leave you counting losses more than wins. Life has a funny way of showing you who really cares. Here I am, sitting on the rough patch of grass by his grave, my dad's grave. Well, he wasn't my biological dad, but that never mattered. He treated me like I was his own, gave me support, taught me right from wrong, showed me kindness. Not like my mother or my sister. I stopped picking up their calls, blocked their numbers, cut them off, just like that. Now here I sit, with only the sound of the wind for company. I talked to him, to my dad, telling him about my day, about the tough root canal, or the kid who wouldn't stop squirming in the chair. It feels right, being here with him, peaceful. Hey Diana, it's Jim from the grave next over. Poor guy lost his wife last year. He's a regular here like me. You're talking to your dad again, huh? Yeah, I say, you know how it is. Jim nods, sure do. Got to keep the connection somehow. How's work going? Same old, same old. Teeth are teeth, J.I. They don't change much. Jim chuckles. Yeah, I guess teeth are more reliable than people, huh? You got that right, I smirk. I've always liked Jim, has a way of saying what he means without wrapping it in cotton. I stand up, brush the grass off my jeans, and take one last look at the headstone. See you tomorrow, Dad, I say softly, though he can't hear me. The door of the car closes with a satisfying thud. I start the engine and roll out of the cemetery. The road stretches out ahead of me, clear and open, just like my future, just like my life now. No more chains pulling me back, no more feeling like a human ATM. My life is mine again. I whisper to the rearview mirror, tucking a stray hair behind my ear. I pull into the traffic. My phone's silent these days, but I like it that way. No surprise calls begging for cash, no manipulative messages, just the occasional text from a friend or a reminder for an appointment. When I get home, I crash on the couch. No yelling, no lies, no fake apologies or promises. Maybe I'll get a dog, a big one with soft ears, someone who's glad to see me for me, not for what's in my wallet. Yeah, that sounds nice. Hey, long time no see. You've really aged. Huh, we're divorced, You could at least try to be a bit more considerate in how you speak. We're exes, so I thought I could speak freely. What have you been up to since we split? Right after our divorce, I got remarried, And guess what? My wife was pregnant right after the wedding. It seemed she was already pregnant when we divorced. It turns out if you're not infertile, having kids is easy. Now I'm living happily with my wife and son. I see, good for you, being so happy. And how about you? Oh, sorry. With your infertility, you'll be alone forever, right? Past 30 and unable to have kids. No one's going to want you. I divorced my ex-husband 50 years ago due to infertility. At a class reunion, I met my ex-husband who boasted about his family. However, it seems he's greatly mistaken. Huh, mistaken about what? Now, I'll make sure he knows so he won't misunderstand. I'm sure he'll be frustrated to hear it. Also, while I'm at it, I'll add a little extra information with a bit of mischief. I decided to tell Derek something I didn't have to. My work beyond my imagination drove him crazy. I'm Amy, 28 years old, and working for our consulting firm. I'm about to get married soon and will be meeting my parents shortly. My soon-to-be husband, Derek, is 28 and a salesman at a major manufacturer. We've been childhood friends since kindergarten. Through middle school, we went to different high schools. And after graduating from university, I left my hometown to start my job. Years later, we reconnected through social media and realized we worked nearby. I met Derek again for the first time since middle school. Reuniting with a childhood friend as adults, away from our hometown, we fell in love right away and eventually decided to marry. Do you think you'll be okay? I'm worried your dad might not like me. Don't worry so much, it'll be fine. But your dad is a company president, right? When we were kids, I didn't think much of it and just called him uncle. But now that I work, it's natural to feel nervous, isn't it? My husband kept adjusting his perfectly straight tie and wiping the sweat from his brow with a handkerchief. He was being tense, and I felt nervous just watching him. Indeed, my father owns a metalworking company, but it's a small to mid-sized business in a rural area. It used to be quite a large company, but it has significantly downsized now, and my father isn't exactly a dignified figure. If you're okay with a daughter like her, you can take her, but remember, no returns. My father's easygoing nature eased my husband's tension within a minute. I won't be returning her. In fact, even if you ask for Amy back, I won't give her up. By the end, my husband was relaxed enough to joke around. My mother and I exchanged glances, sharing a "well, that's over with" look. At least that meant the introduction went well, so my husband could relax. But on the ride home, he looked a bit troubled. After hearing about the factory and the company today, it seems your father's business isn't doing too well, is it? It's not as good as it used to be. Well, that's just the way things go with time. But you're a management consultant, right? Can't you do something? Do you know how hard it is to turn a company around? I have my own job, and it's not like I can help my dad's business on the side. If I were to do it, I'd have to quit my current job and join his company. You are an only child, so you're planning to quit your job eventually and take over the family business, right? That's not going to happen. My dad doesn't want me to inherit the company and struggle. He plans to sell it in the future. That's why I'm only giving him simple advice to keep the company going until he retires. I see. Realizing there's no need to worry about my father's company, my husband's expression softened. I felt happy that he cared about my father, and my expression softened too. Half a year later, we got married. I'll have a coffee. Do you want your usual tea, Annie? Yes, thank you. While I was cleaning up the dinner dishes, my husband brewed my tea. He timed it so the tea wouldn't get cold, waiting until I finished with the dishes. Me being a salesman, he's very attentive. Without me saying anything, he anticipates what I need and does it first. I have no complaints about that, and our married life is going smoothly. However, 2 years into our marriage, although I had no complaints about our life, I started feeling anxious. Our relationship was good, and we were intimate with each other. But 2 years into the marriage, we still hadn't been blessed with a child. There's no need to rush. It will happen in time. But I'm already 30. I can't help but feel a bit anxious. My husband, lounging on the living room sofa and fiddling with his smartphone, responded lightly to my concerns. Normally, I might have expected him to listen more seriously. However, I know he's intentionally keeping it casual, so I don't feel too anxious or responsible about not being able to get pregnant. Derek is an only child, too, and his parents both worked. He often spent time alone at home and has a strong longing for a family life. Both of my parents worked as well, but I used to go to my parents' office after school, so I never felt lonely like he did, always having my parents and their employees around. But I understand the importance of spending time with people. Therefore, I want to make my husband's wish come true. I also want a child. Just to be sure, I'll go to the hospital and get checked. Do you really need to do that? If there's nothing wrong, then that's great. But if there is, it's better to know the cause, right? Well, that might be true. But the next weekend, I went to the hospital alone. There were 2 reasons for this. First, I thought that even if I got checked, they would probably say there's nothing wrong. The second reason was that if there was a problem, I didn't know how to react if my husband was there with me. Without thinking too deeply, I went to the hospital, waiting for my name to be called while thinking about what to buy on the way back. The examination was quick, but the results would come later, so I went home for the day. 2 weeks later, I was given the results. Why does it seem like bad news always takes precedence in these situations? After hearing the results, I didn't go shopping as planned and walked home, staring at the ground. It turns out I'm infertile. I see. The night I received the results, I told my husband about my infertility. I chose to tell him during dinner, hoping it would somehow ease the mood, but the atmosphere at home became tense, and both of us stopped eating. However, not everything was hopeless. There was still some chance. The doctor said that my infertility could be treated with about a 30% success rate. The success rate decreases as you get older, especially after 30. It seems I just made it in time. 30%, huh? And that rate will decrease from now on, I said, contemplating the odds. While I started to eat again, my husband's fork remained still. It seems there is a difference in perception between my husband and me regarding the 30% figure. When I was told I was infertile, I despaired, thinking I couldn't have children. However, hearing the 30% chance, I felt relieved, considering it a not-so-low number. But to my husband, 30% didn't seem like a high probability. Seeing his disappointed expression, I stopped eating again. Since that day, our once smooth marital life has become somewhat awkward. "Will you be home late tomorrow, too?" I asked, hoping for a sign of normalcy. As I cleared the dishes, I spoke to my husband, relaxing in the living room, but he replied disinterestedly. Ever since he learned about my infertility, he has been coming home late. He says he's busy with work, but I suspect he wants to reduce the time he spends at home. As a result, on weekends, he leaves early in the morning and returns late at night with his late returns. I started eating dinner alone. Moreover, he stopped sleeping in the bedroom and started sleeping on the living room sofa. We lived together, but it seemed like we were living separately. I felt lonely as I sensed my husband drifting away, but knowing the cause lies with me, I couldn't blame him. 6 months later, our relationship had completely cooled down, and we hardly spoke at home. Today, being a weekend, he left the house early. Watching him put on his shoes at the entrance, I felt a sense of relief. I felt lighter after he left and found myself more efficient with the laundry. But as I was about to put his shirt in the washing machine, I sighed. I thought again with the foundation, it's so hard to remove. His shirt had foundation stains, but I wasn't surprised. It has been happening occasionally for the past 2 or 3 months, since our relationship had already cooled off. I had no intention of making a fuss about a possible affair. I spread out the shirt stained with foundation and resigned myself to the fact that our marriage was probably reaching its end. That night, I approached the topic of divorce. Should we end this? If we divorce, you can be with your new woman, right? So you knew, let's skip the pretense. I won't ask for a property division over the affair, so can we part ways smoothly? Okay, I have a job, so I don't need the money. Plus, as he works for a major manufacturer, the property division wouldn't hurt him much. So a hassle-free divorce is preferable to me. Derek accepted the divorce without batting an eye, as if he anticipated it, though I wasn't asking for a property division. I did want to know a bit about his affair partner. This was just my curiosity. What's she like, your partner? She's 2 years younger. We met through our shared interest in fishing. Ah, so that's where you've been going on weekends. She's bold to date a married man. You didn't. Your marriage did. You know, I was honest. I told her we were divorcing and that our relationship was with the intent to remarry. No, I'm just waiting for her. Waiting? Don't tell me she's married. No, she's single. I succeeded in a love conquest. I had a lot to say after hearing his story, but saying too much could jeopardize the smooth progression of our divorce. So I swallowed my words. The divorce went through without any issues. He quickly moved on to his new partner, who apparently had also left her boyfriend. I thought I'd be fine with a divorce, having prepared for it, but the reality hit me harder than expected. After staying in the house and continuing to work for a while, I eventually quit my job and returned to my parents' home. 15 years later, back at my parents' home, I fully recovered from the divorce. It's almost a distant memory now. Then I received an invitation to a middle school reunion. Derek, also a childhood friend, might be there. During the divorce, I prioritized a smooth separation, so I didn't say everything I wanted to. I didn't ask for property division over the affair, but that didn't mean I wasn't angry. I decided to attend the reunion, thinking of getting a little back at him after 15 years, but my small act of revenge would drastically affect his life. When I arrived, I was greeted by many familiar faces. Catching up with old friends, we reminisced about the past. While enjoying the conversation, I saw him approaching me. "Hey, long time no see." "You've aged," Derek greeted me with a laugh and a rude comment. If I'm old, then so is he, right? We were enjoying the conversation until he approached with a villainous grin, making the others feel awkward. "We're divorced, remember. Try to be more considerate." "We're exes, so I thought I could speak freely." "What have you been up to since our divorce?" "I got remarried right after ours, you know. And my wife was pregnant immediately. Turns out if you're not infertile, it's easy to have kids. Now I'm living happily with my wife and son." "I see. Good for you, being so happy. How about you?" "Oh, sorry. Being infertile, you must be alone for life, right? No one wants someone over 30 who can't have kids, right? Who's alone?" Derek then started showing photos of his family outings on his phone and bragging about his new wife and son, trying to assert his happiness over mine. I listened to Derek's boring stories with a blank expression. He seems to be under several misconceptions. Just correcting those will surely make him feel regretful. As I was thinking about how to address his misunderstandings, my daughter Jane approached me at the perfect moment. "Mommy, I made a new friend." "That's great, sweetie. Mommy is talking to this man right now, so can you play with your new friend a little longer? Okay." She obediently ran off, full of energy. "Hey, who was that girl?" "Oh, she's my daughter. Didn't you know kids were allowed today? Look, there are other kids here too." "No, I mean, didn't she just call you Mommy?" "Yes, that's my daughter Jane. She's 10 this year." "But you were infertile, right? How do you have a child?" "Oh, I see. She's your stepchild from a new marriage, right?" "How rude. Jane is my biological daughter." "Infertile, but you have a child? How?" "I told you infertility can be treated. You just assumed it was incurable." Around us, soft laughter could be heard. I had shared with close friends about my divorce and having a child, so Derek, who assumed I couldn't have children and was flaunting his own, became the butt of the joke. He realized he was being laughed at. "So you have a child, which means you got married again." "Congratulations." Derek, embarrassed by his failed attempt to show off, was red-faced. His congratulatory words seemed more like an attempt to save face. "Who'd marry an old lady like you?" "It's called workplace romance, really. Still working at the consulting firm." "Oh, you don't know. I took over my father's company. Now I'm the president. Dad hasn't retired yet. He's the chairman." "What? I thought that company was going to be sold after the divorce." I returned home and decided to take over the family business. In these 15 years, it was tough, but now our annual revenue is close to $30 million. We've moved from a small to a medium-sized business to a major one. $30 million. My successful turnaround of my father's company was well known among local friends. Derek, unaware of this, was laughed at again. You said turning a company around wasn't easy. It wasn't. But after the divorce and quitting my job, I could fully dedicate myself to it. Reviving my father's company was a continuous struggle. Initially, many employees had a negative impression of me suddenly returning to take over. So I first focused on building trust through active communication with employees. It took 2 years just to achieve that. Once I earned their trust, I leveraged my consulting experience to prove my business acumen. It took about 3 years for this phase. During this time, I worked so hard that I wore myself out, both physically and mentally. But my current husband was there to support me. He also stood by me through the infertility treatments, and 10 years ago, we were blessed with our daughter, Jane. Even after her birth for 10 years, we all worked tirelessly. Before I knew it, the company broke through the common business barrier of $10 million in annual revenue and is now growing towards $30 million. You are the president of a company with $30 million in revenue. Yes. You left me because of my infertility and went to another woman, not knowing that I had the potential to become the president of a company with $30 million in revenue, but I was able to have a child. How do you feel now? And how about you? How's work? Have you become a sales manager or something? I asked Derek with a villainous smile, not knowing his current status at the company. But in a major manufacturer company like his, there must be a lot of competition. Seeing him clench his teeth in silence. I was convinced he hadn't made significant progress in his career. I successfully countered his attempt to glow over his children and took the upper hand with my career success. Seeing his frustrated expression, I felt satisfied but decided to drop one more bomb. By the way, you said your wife got pregnant immediately after your marriage, which was right after our divorce. But she also left her boyfriend around the same time, right? Does that really mean that it's my child? Of course it is. There's no mistake about it. That doesn't sound very convincing. You know you were having an affair and she was cheating too, right? The topics of affairs, cheating, and the possibility that Derek's child might belong to someone else drew the attention of those around us. Not just our close friends, but many others gathered around us. Though it was a bit embarrassing to be the center of attention, Derek was clearly the villain in this situation. All the cold stares were focused on him. Realizing the cold stares were directed at him, Derek fled the venue as if he was escaping. Satisfied with making him embarrassed, I resumed chatting with my friends, feeling like I had gotten my revenge on him. I thought I wouldn't have to think about Derek anymore. However, a month after the reunion, he called me, probably getting my number from a friend at the event. Reluctantly, I answered the phone. Hey, did you know about this? I racked my brain for what he could be referring to, but came up blank and asked him directly. What are you talking about all of a sudden? What's going on? It's about my child. Just like you said, it turns out he's not actually my child. What? I couldn't help but burst into laughter, even though I knew I shouldn't. Apparently, Derek had a DNA test done, worried by my words, and it turned out that the child he thought was his with his new wife was not biologically related to him. How did you know that, and why didn't you tell me? I didn't know. I just said that to make you uneasy, or maybe cause a little argument with your wife. I never thought it would actually be true. Was she a crazy woman? No, she thought it was my child, too. She didn't know until I told her. She had a boyfriend until right before getting pregnant with you, and you both never questioned it. That's unbelievable. But you've raised him for 15 years. Even if he's not biologically yours, he's still your son, right? What? No way. I was deceived into raising someone else's child for 15 years. It's definitely going to be a divorce. I had a lot to say to Derek, just like during our divorce discussion. But everyone has their own values, and it's not my place to interfere in someone else's family matters. So you're going to divorce her. That's the problem. I can't because she won't agree to it. Apparently, upon discovering the child wasn't his, Derek wanted to divorce his now wife. She, however, first tried to contact her boyfriend from 15 years ago, probably to see if she could rely on him after a divorce. But after telling him about the child, he disappeared, quitting his job and becoming unreachable. Can't you divorce her because she had another man's child? Isn't that grounds for divorce? That's where it gets complicated. The child was conceived before our marriage, so it's not technically infidelity. We both thought he was ours. It seems the situation between Derek and his new wife is more confusing than I imagined. He explained it in detail, but it was a legal matter that I didn't fully grasp. What I understood was that legally Derek is recognized as the father since they both believed the child was theirs. To push through with a divorce, he would need to legally prove he's not the father and nullify their parental relationship. However, there was a case where the Supreme Court ruled that a DNA test couldn't negate a father-child relationship, making his situation quite complicated. Even if the parent-child relationship is legally dissolved, it's not entirely the wife's fault, as both she and Derek believed it was their child, and neither had investigated the father's identity. Since it wasn't a deliberate deception on her part, a divorce on the grounds of the child's paternity may not be granted. So the new wife, having nowhere else to turn after the real father disappeared, refuses to divorce Derek. He wants to divorce but can't use the child's paternity as a reason. That's the situation. So you want a divorce but can't, right? Exactly. What should I do? Continue raising someone else's child? I sighed upon hearing Derek's dilemma. You keep saying someone else's child, but he's been your son, hasn't he? Oh, he's the child of my wife's ex, not mine. I tried to reason with him, but it seemed futile. I have nothing more to say to you. It was your decision to divorce me over my supposed infertility, to take your new wife from her boyfriend, and not to check who the child's real father was. Own up to your decisions. I hung up on him in anger. What a pathetic ex-husband, crying to his ex-wife from 15 years ago. Returning home from work, I found my husband and daughter happily watching TV in the living room. Watching them, I felt glad I had divorced Derek. Apparently, Derek couldn't divorce and moved out, so now they're living separately. If the separation lasts 3 to 5 years, it could become grounds for divorce. However, until then, he must pay living expenses and child support for his wife and son. His son is 15, so even if the divorce happens in 3 years, he will be an adult. His wife likely won't drag out the divorce process then. Also, his son doesn't know the truth yet about his biological father and resents Derek for leaving. Learning the truth might either alleviate this resentment or it won't. I hope Derek faces his son's anger without running away. By then, he will have experienced a second divorce and probably be done with marriage. My ex-husband, who tried to gloat over me for being childless, ended up having his life turned upside down by a casual statement I made. He should have refrained from trying to one-up me. I continued to work hard, and unlike Derek, our family relations are strong. We are currently planning our next family outing.